Okay. Okay. Good afternoon again to my dear colleagues. So as we continued our discussion, I'll be discussing the issues in management decision making. So what are the decision errors and so ito yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon. So sabi nga natin, no, the the output of our decision may succeed or fail. So ano ba yung mga errors na pwedeng mangyari? Bakit nag-failed yung ating decision making? So number one, we have the anchoring, the status quo, the sunk cost, the confirming evidence. We have the framing, overconfidence, prudence, and recallability. So medyo masyadong matechnical itong mga terms. So to further understand kung ano ba yung meaning nitong mga bagay na ito, so iisa-isahin natin siya. So let's proceed to what we call anchoring. So nakikita nyo dito sa left side, no, of our screen, nakalagay, pag sinabing anchoring, what we see or hear first feels most important, which gives disproportionate weight to the information received. Initial impression, estimates, or data anchor subsequent thought and judgments. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Ang ibig sabihin ng anchoring, in Tagalog, di ba, nakaangkla, nakakapit. So, ang ibig sabihin na sa anchoring ay mas yung sensory impressions natin na binanggit natin kanina dun sa factors, mas inuunahan tayo as first line of thought and judgment kung ano yung una nating nakita, narinig, naramdaman. So yun yung mas pinaprioritize natin, mas binibigyan natin ng diin. So sabi nga natin, making decision is the most important job. And it may be the toughest and the riskiest. Sabi nga natin, and the decisions can damage a career or a business or a service, and sometimes irrevocable na siya or irreparable na siya. So in many cases, they can be tracked back the way the decisions were made and the alternatives were not clearly defined. Minsan, hindi kasi na-identify nga ng maayos ang problema. And the right information was not collected. So sabi nga natin, doon sa kaninang binanggit natin, no, merong misidentified information, merong hindi tayo nakakolekta ng tamang kasi kahit minsan sinusunod mo yung proseso pero mali ka ng pagpili. So, your decision making might fail. So, ano ba yung antidote or pwede natin gawin para maiwasan natin yung tinatawag na anchoring? Nakalagay dito, what to do? You have to consider your objectives. As we've said earlier, dapat nga yung ating objectives, di ba? It should be concise, it should be clearly defined, and we have to take different perspective. You try to use using other alternative starting points and approach rather than sticking with the first line of thought that occurs to you. Ibig sabihin, huwag lang tayong tumingin sa kung ano yung una nating narinig, naramdaman o kailangan din natin ang ibang aspeto o ibang makita ang ibang alternative sa ating decision making. Nakalagay dito, Mark, pakiabalik sa anchoring. Ayan yung slide. So sabi pa dito, we have to think before asking. So isa ito sa pwede nating antidote. So think about the problem on your own before consulting others in order to avoid becoming anchored by their ideas. Na-mention nga natin kanina, no? When you decide, 'di ba, kahit dumadaan naman tayo sa mga problema, mas una tayong nag-iisip kung ano yung mga pwede nating gawin. And there were times na maghahanap naman tayo ng ibang mga taong magbibigay din sa atin ng mga ideas or opinions na pwedeng makatulong sa atin para masolusyonan yung ating problema. Pero sabi nga, mas una natin dapat timbangin ang mga bagay-bagay sa ating sarili bago tayo humingi ng tulong sa iba. And the third one, antidote for anchoring, is to seek input. Sabi nga, be open-minded. Sabi nga ni Sir kanina, no, sino sa atin yung open-minded at green-minded. So you have to seek information and opinions from variety of people to widen your frame of reference and to push your mind to fresh directions. Tell them a little as possible your own ideas and estimates and tentative decisions. Sabi nga, so nasabi nga natin kanina na we have to have networking, collaborations, and we have to also seek the help of other people. Sabi nga natin, We have to widen our frame kasi nga minsan may mga bagay na hindi natin nakita or tayo lang yung nakakakita pero mas ibang tao yung nakakakita na mas nakakatulong sa atin para gumawa ng desisyon. So be particular wary of anchors and negotiations. Think through your position before any negotiation begins in order to avoid being anchored by the other party's initial proposal. And at the same time, you have to look for opportunities to use anchors to your own advantage. So, for the next trap, we have the status quo. Pag sinabi natin status quo trap, when you say status quo, you are referring to the current, to the recent situation. No? So we prefer things to stay the same even when better alternatives exist. Mas gugustuhin natin mag-stay na lang tayo doon sa desisyon na yon, pero alam natin naman na merong alternatibo or may mga options pa naman tayo. We all like to believe that we make decisions rationally and objectively. But the fact is, we all carry biases, and those biases influence the choices we make. O nagiging bias tayo, no? Sabi nga natin, kung yun na yung una mong napili, parang hindi mo nakikita yung iba mo pang options, hindi mo na nakikita yung ibang bagay. So decision makers display strong bias toward alternatives that perpetuate the status quo. And we should remember that in any given decision, maintaining the status quo may indeed be the best choice, but you don't want to choose it just because it is comfortable. Ang ibig sabihin, sa current situation mo, huwag ka lang nakatali doon, huwag kang maging bias na yun na yung pipiliin. Maaari mo siyang piliin, pero hindi mo siya pipiliin nga dahil yun na yung pinaka-convenient o pinaka-available na pwede mo nang maging solusyon sa problema. Sabi nga, you have to evaluate, you have to analyze all other alternatives and options at your hand. So ano ba yung antidote or what you have to consider para ba masolusyonan yung tinatawag na status quo trap? So you have to consider your objectives. Sabi nga, always remind yourself of your objectives and examine how they would serve by the status quo, and you may find the elements of the current situation acts as barriers to your goals. Next, you have options. Never think of the status quo as your only alternative. Identify other options and use them as counterbalances, carefully evaluating all the pluses and minuses. So yun na yung sinasabi ko kanina. Don't exaggerate switching costs. Avoid exaggerating the effort or cost involved into switching from the status quo. And don't settle immediately. Remember that desirability of the status quo will change over time. When comparing alternatives, always evaluate them in terms of the future as well as the present. If you have several alternatives that are superior to the status quo, don't default because you are having a hard time picking the best alternative. You have to force yourself to choose. So ang ibig sabihin, huwag mo nga madaliin, no? So, lagi natin pinag-uusapan kanina, when your mind is in a state of stress or distortion or yung hindi ka komportable sa iyong desisyon. So don't settle immediately. Sabi nga natin, you have to compare, to weigh the available alternatives or options para makapagpaisip ka kung ano ba talaga yung best option na pwede mong gawin. So let's move forward to sunk cost trap. Ano ba yung tinatawag na sunk cost trap? Sunk cost trap, ibig sabihin, nalunod ka, no? Umilalim ka na, nalunod ka. No? We make decisions that justify past choices even when they no longer seem valid. So nakaraan na yung choices mo pero hindi na siya valid pero gina-justify mo pa rin siya. And another of our deep-seated biases is to make choices in a way that justify past choices even when the past choices no longer seem valid. And most of us have fallen into this trap. Natigil ka na, nalunod ka na sa decision mo yun, sa opinion mo, sa ideya mong yun. Why can't people free themselves from past decision? No? Sabi nga natin, whether you succeed or you failed, no? You have to free from yourselves from yung yung para kang makonsensya na nagkamali ka o nag-failed pa. No? You have to move forward. You have to move freely. No? Because there's always a chance and an opportunity, no, to solve or any of your problems. And 'di ba in time naman, sabi nga natin, when you make mistakes, you always have the the experience na and the gut feel, no, on what next steps will be better for you in deciding. So frequently, it is because they are willingly and consciously or not to admit to a mistake. And sometimes good ideas will end in failure. So yun nga. So what to do or the antidote that you may do, no? Ano ba yung mga pwedeng gawin? So sabi nga natin, kanina pa natin to binabanggit, involve outsiders. Seek out and listen to the views of people who were uninvolved in the entire decision. Next is you have to accept that mistakes happen. Examine why admitting a mistake distresses you, and even the best and most experienced managers are not immune to errors in judgment. So sabi nga natin, no, wala palaging, ah, hindi laging maganda yung desisyon. Laging meron tayong nagiging desisyon na hindi maganda or mali. Sabi nga, yung the most hardest decision are kumbaga, the most precious and most admirable one because you're able to survive those hard times of making decision. And next, you have to allow room for failure. Don't cultivate a failure-fearing culture that leads employee to perpetuate and cover up mistakes. Sabi nga natin, ano naman, abnormal naman, no? Kung hindi lahat tayong magkakamali, no? Sabi nga natin, there's always room for improvement or for failure. Ang importante nga dyan, matuto tayong tumindig, matuto tayong tumayo, matuto tayong manindigan sa ating pagkakamali. So next, another trap, we have confirming evidence, no? Ano ba ibig sabihin nitong confirming evidence or error? We seek information that supports our existing point of view and reject anything that doesn't agree it. This bias leads us to seek out information that supports our existing instinct or point of view while avoiding information that contradicts with it. Sarado naman yung utak mo, no? Doon sa mga ibang sa idea ng ibang tao, no? Kapag alam mong kontra sa iyo, ayaw mo na siyang pakinggan, no? So what after all did you expect? What did you expect your acquaintance to give other than a strong argument in favor of other own decision? So bakit pa nga ikaw papakinggan ng iba? Ibig sabihin, kung humingi ka ng tulong sa iba, ayaw mo nang pakinggan, dinidisagree mo yung sinasabi niya. So, what can you expect from yung kausap, no? Kung sarado na yung utak mo dun sa idea or information na yun, it only affects where we go to collect evidence, but also how we interpret the evidence we do receive, and leading us to give too much weight to supporting information and too little to conflicting information. So, ano naman yung pwede natin gawin or antidote or gamot para maiwasan natin itong tinatawag na confirming evidence? Una, consider all evidence. Always check to see whether you are examining all the evidence with equal rigor or equally. Avoid the tendency to accept confirming evidence without question. Ayan. Next is you have to find a devil's advocate. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Get someone you respect to play devil's advocate, to argue against the decision you're contemplating. Better yet, build the counter-arguments yourself. And what's the strongest reason to do something else? So, the second stronger reason and the third, and consider the position with an open mind. So, sabi nga natin, open-minded. Minsan, di ba, may mga tao tayong nilalapitan, no, to ask opinions or ideas na minsan mas gusto natin yung kukontrahin tayo para ma-brainstorming natin kung ano yung mga pwede nating mas gawin, no, sa ating mga desisyon, no? Na minsan mas gusto mo yung may kukontra sa iyo para mas ma-weigh mo or ma-evaluate mo yung mga pros and cons ng iyong decision. So avoid people who don't agree with you, no? Be honest with yourself about your motive. Are you really gathering info to help you make a smart choice, or are you just looking for evidence confirming what you think you'd like to do? Or in seeking evidence of others, don't ask leading questions that invite confirming evidence. And if you find that advisor always seems to support your point of view, find a new advisor and don't surround yourself with yes man. Ibig sabihin, pag nasalita ka, oo na lang ng oo sa iyo. No, na minsan maling na yata yung sinasabi mo, pero oo pa rin. So, minsan nahanap ka ng mga taong magbabalanse ng mga sinasabi mo na mas magkakaroon ng clarity yung yung views or perspective mo when it comes to decision making. So next step, we have uh, framing, no? Ano ba yung itinatawag namang framing? Framing is the first step in making decision, and you have to frame a question. It is also one of the most dangerous steps. And how you frame a problem can profoundly influence your choices. Kanina pa natin yung binabanggit, no? Sa una pa lang sa pag-identify ng problem, 'di ba? Sinasabi natin, dun pa lang dapat alam mo na naka-frame na sa iyo kung ano ba talaga yung problema. No, a poorly framed problem can undermine even the best considered decision. So ano naman yung antidote natin dito? Or pwede natin gawin, no? To avoid yung framing, no? So don't automatically accept the initial frame. Wherever it was formulated by someone else, always try to reframe the problem in various ways. Ayan. And try posing problems in neutral, redundant ways that combines gains and losses and embrace different reference points. So, kanina pinabanggit natin yung evaluate, you have to generate, you have to analyze. So, yan yung mga term natin ginagamit, no? So, think hard throughout your decision-making process about how your problem is framed. And when others recommend decisions, examine the way they were framed and challenge them with different frames. Next, we have overconfidence. So, isa rin daw ito sa problema or error when it comes to decision making. Anong ibig sabihin ng overconfidence? No? Ibig sabihin, we tend to trust our own estimates too much. No, masyado yung tiwala or believe natin sa sarili. We put too much trust in the accuracy of our forecast. No? Sabi nga natin, no, masyadong overconfidence, no? Minsan nagiging komportable na lang tayo masyado tayong komportable dun sa mga kakayanan, sa mga forecast natin, sa mga probabilities na pwedeng mangyari sa atin. No? So, and most of us are overconfident about our judgment, abilities, and prediction, and accuracy. We remember our success and quickly forget our errors. No, mas nakikita lang natin yung ating success. No, nakakalimutan na natin yung ating yung mga pagkakamali na pwedeng mangyari. And managers who underestimate the high end or overestimate the low end of a crucial variable may miss attractive opportunities or expose themselves to far greater risk than ever imagined. So, minsan, sa overconfidence natin sa sarili, sa pagdesisyon, no? Napapahamak tayo minsan sa ating mga ginagawang desisyon, no? To the point na, yun nga, na masyado tayong confident at nakakalimutan na nating timbangin yung mga low and high ends of the situation or variables. So, ano ba yung mga antidote or pwede nating gawin, no? Sabi nga natin, look at the extremes, challenge those extremes, and question those estimations. And next slide, prudence. Ano ba ibig sabihin natin ng prudence? Pag sinabi natin prudence, it means you are cautious or being careful. You are thinking of the consequences, no? We just estimates to be on the safe side. We often use excessive caution when we try to predict uncertain events. And one common example is the worst case analysis, no? Which add enormous costs and no practical benefits. And too much prudence can as dangerous as too little. So a virtue, sabi nga natin, no? Where prudence means you are being careful and it's a virtue of deliberation and you take into account the possible consequences of your decisions and taking actions that are for the best. So yung ibig sabihin natin ng prudence. So what will we do? Or what would be the antidote? Sabi natin, we have to aim for accuracy. Anong ibig sabihin nun? You must take a very disciplined approach to making forecasts and judging probability assessments. You have to reduce the effects of making estimates and always start considering the low and high range of values. Challenge your estimates of the extremes, sabi nga natin, and try to imagine circumstances where the actual figure would fall below your low or above high and adjust your range accordingly. And you have to ask others to do the same, meaning to say, that challenges the estimates of your subordinates and advisors in a similar fashion, and that they are also susceptible to overconfidence. No, and always state your estimates honestly and explain to anyone who will be using them that they have not been adjusted. And you have to always emphasize the need for honest input to anyone who will be supplying you with estimates or information. And you have to test the estimates over a reasonable range to assess their impact. And you have to take a second look at a more sensitive estimate. So yun yung tinatawag nating prudence. So the next topic that I'm going to discuss, meron pa pala. I forgot. Yung recallability. So, sabi nga natin, pag sinabi natin recallability, yun naman yung we overly influenced by our past experiences, which prompts us to give undue weight to recent traumatic events. And we are frequently base our prediction about future on our memory of the past events. Ibig sabihin, it is based on our experience, mas inaalala pa natin yung mga dati nang nangyari or nakaraang pangyayari. And we can overly influence by dramatic event. And dramatic or traumatic event in your life can also distort your thinking and leave strong impressions on our minds that can skew future decision-making efforts. Kunwari, yung in your past experiences, nagkamali ka, and you came across to the same situation, pero binabalikan mo pa rin yun, binabalikan mo pa rin yung pangyayari, iyong nakaraan, no? Ang sabi natin, no, yung hindi maganda, leave it there. Kung ano yung maganda, let's take it in ourselves. So what to do, what would be the antidote? So sabi nga, examine assumptions. You have to get actual statistics whenever possible and try not to be guided by impressions. Sabi nga natin nung una, no, you have to have that sensory impressions within the environment or outside your comfort zone. But you have to look for other options, all alternatives. No, you don't have to trust only your intuition or your gut feel. No, and sabi nga natin paulit-ulit, you have to seek the help of so I think that's it for the errors and traps, and we have to move on for the next slide. So we have the creativity and decision making. So I think this is the last part of my report. Ano ba yung creativity and decision making? Sabi nga, creativity means creation of new ideas, method or product or service. It is the cognitive process of developing an idea, a concept, a commodity, or discovery that is viewed as novel by its creator or target audience. And creativity is not a quality of a person. It is a quality of ideas or of behaviors or products. No? Creativity and decision-making is the generation of a new idea or unique approach that solves a particular problem. Organizations should create an environment profitability once encourages creative climates. No? Number 3 is interaction. Interaction with people within and outside the organization helps in generating ideas. Yan yung sinasabi pa rin natin kanina, no? Makakakuha tayong mga information from other people, from other organization. Number 4, you have tolerate failure. So you have to identify the cause of failure and modify them. Motivate them to come up with new ideas. No? And you should have a clear objective. Sabi kanina pa natin inuulit, no? You have to define the purpose for creativity, for the new ideas. And it optimizes the use of time, energy, and money. So, in every decision, we always have to utilize, sabi nga natin kanina pa, the available resources, whether it is a human, whether it's a manpower, whether it's a money, time, effort, or information and technology, or whatever resources available at hand. So what are the process of creativity in decision making? So we have 5. So we have sensing, preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. So isa-isahin natin siya. So when we say sensing, ito yung you identifies the problem. You analyze its importance. You are curious to solve the problem, and curiosity leads to development of ideas. So, yun yung tinatawag natin. So, ito naman medyo self-explanatory siya, no? So, number 2, we have the preparation. In the preparation stage, you collect info and formulate hypotheses, no? You may refer to past experiences, researches, and innovations, no? Ayan. And number 3, we have the incubation. So, pinaiksi ko na lang po ito, no? Para mas madali natin maintindihan. Masyadong technical kasi yung iba. So, excuse me. When you have incubation, you move from conscious deliberation to mali yun. Subconscious deliberation yun. A typo error po, no? So, you make decisions in subconscious minds and you generate new ideas. And we have the illumination. Yun naman, you list all the possible solutions. Sabi nga natin kanina, no? Sinusulat dapat natin yan. Ano yung possible options and possible alternatives. And some are rejected and some are accepted for further analysis. Sabi nga natin, mini-measure natin o wini-weigh natin yung alternatives at hand natin, no? Kumbaga, pina-priority natin, alin yung mas kailangan natin, alin yung list na possible solution do sa ating problema, no? Wini-weigh natin, mini-measure natin. Meron tayong tinitira na pagpipilian na yun sa tingin natin, yun yung mas makakatulong sa ating desisyon. Meron din na namin tayo yung isinasantabi na sa tingin natin ay hindi naman na yun acceptable or angkop para masolusyonan yung ating problema. So when we say the last process is the verification, so it is refers the testing the ideas, no? So kung may naisip ka na, no, na idea, sabi nga natin, kaya nga tayong merong implement the action. You have to implement, you have to take action, no? And we should always, sabi nga natin kanina, no, to consider if it is found feasible, applying to solve the problem, it is acceptable, no? Is it feasible or desirable? And what are the 3 components of creativity? So the 3 components are, we have the motivation, the expertise, and the creative thinking skills. So motivation, ito yung tinatawag nating intrinsic is more effective than extrinsic. So our inner creativity is more effective than extrinsic creativity. So as we mentioned earlier, no, sabi nga, we have to look first, no, when we think of our decisions, we keep it first to ourselves, no, mamuni-muni muna tayo sa ating sarili, then we seek help to other people then, no, pero di ba mas inuuna nga natin munang isipin yung sa ating munang sariling desisyon, saka lang tayo hingi ng tulong sa iba for us to mas ma-evaluate nga natin, as mas ma-analyze natin yung ating desisyon. And next is we have the expertise. No? You have to be technical, procedural, and intellectual knowledge. So, I recall, no, yung una nating topic. No? You should have the intellectual capacity, no, or intellectual knowledge. No? Expertise, no. Expertise not only the technical aspect, but you have also the procedural, no, the process. You should have the technical know-how on the process, no? Hindi lang kumbaga yung theories, but you also have to to anchor, or parang kailangan mo pa rin i-blend, no, yung maliban sa theories, but how you execute or manage the decision or the decision making, no? And next, we have creativity thinking skills. So how flexibly and imaginatively people approach problems, no? Sabi nga, may kanya tayo pagtanggap, no? On how we approach our own problems. Merong flexible, mas madaling maka-adapt kahit saan. kahit sa anong sitwasyon, no? So iba-iba tayo, no? Dito nga pumapasok minsan yung tinatawag natin kanina, no? As we recall, yung values, no? Na sabi nga natin, values is the yung kumbaga is the na form na sa sarili natin, no? Na in life we have our own values na naka-inculcate sa sarili natin, and what we are, no, is sometimes turns out of how we see things differently or perspectively, no? So what are the importance of creativity and decision making? Sabi nga, when you have creative skills, no, your creativity renews motivation, no? Basta mo motivate ka, it promotes clarity, no? It strengthens critical thinking. Mas nakakapag-isip ka because nga you are making new concepts and new ideas. You generate new ideas and approaches. It helps see the bigger picture of the situation. Mas nakikita mo yung bigger side. Hindi mo lang nakikita yung mundo mo. Mas napipicture mo yung mas malawak na mundo, no? Na lahat ng anggulo at aspeto ng mga bagay-bagay ay mas nakikita mo, no? And cross up productivity, no? Yun nga, sabi nga, it's a way or opportunities for growth, and it promotes positivity when you have creative skills, no? Mas nagiging positibo yung pananaw mo sa buhay because sabi nga, it creates new ideas. So bagong idea, bagong panimula, no? Or bagong proseso na you are eager, no, to have the positive output or outcome of the situation. And it promotes logical reasoning. Kasi sabi nga kanina, di ba, you have to be rationally and objectively when it comes to our decision making, no? Yung hindi mo lang nakikita, yung hindi mo lang iisipin yung mga nararamdaman, nakikita or napapakinggan mo. You have to be logical, no? You have to have a reason, no? Magaling ka dapat din na magbalanse, mag-counterbalance ng mga situation, no? Of the do's and don'ts of the situation. So I think that's my presentation. So sabi nga, think outside the box, no? So wag lang natin tingnan kung ano lang yung nakikita natin. We should always see things in a broader and wider and positive side of the situation. I think that's all for my presentation. And thank you, my friend, Mark. Ayan.